Has Ukraine pivoted its strategy to focus on one mission, grinding down Russia's military? How are they going to be doing it? I'm Paul, U.S. Army combat veteran. It's December 2nd, 2023. This is your daily Ukraine update. Let's get right into it. Okay, first, taking a look at the control map, and there's been a couple of changes across the front line. First off, you're seeing Russian forces advancing east of Terny, and this is a fairly significant, well, it is a large territorial change, but we should calibrate significance. As you can see, no roads, not really any key terrain, just moving and advancing through these windbreaks of, around maybe 1-2 kilometers of change, which is a lot. But as we've talked about, it's not a lot by Northern Front standards. And what's also significant is that what they've changed over is not on the road to anywhere. You can see that you've got this network here of Terny, Yempolivka, and this huge array of reservoirs that form a sort of natural barrier. And you can see that Russian forces are advancing, but they're not really getting themselves access to any other roadways or pushing Ukrainians, for example, up against these reservoirs. There's just not a lot of significance to this territory. It's not in the service of any larger objective. And again, it sort of follows my theory that Russian forces are trying to show progress without regard for whether it's part of a larger strategic aim. Now, when we move on, right, you see that there's a few other areas where there's been some changes. One is near Marinka, and you can see, right, we're talking about some marginal gains here, literally it appears to be about 2 city blocks. And 2 city blocks is 2 city blocks. You can see Ukraine only holds about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 blocks of Marinka left. But when we zoom out, remember, bear in mind, even if we were to take this, check the status, 90 days ago or more, you could see there's not really a tremendous update. Right. This isn't a sign of like larger Russian progress. You can see as we move through time, the efforts of what looks like the 150th Motorized Rifle Division, the 5th, and the 103rd have produced no gains, no changes in Marinka. So again, is this reflective of some kind of deeper, more complex strategy? Is this part of a big Russian breakthrough? No on all counts, basically. That's sort of the takeaway that you should take from this, that this is not part of Ukrainian forces. This should not be taken as any indication of like a failure on their part. Sorry, we moved us back through time. Okay, so there's also some other changes, right? We look near Stepova, and you're seeing something very similar, right? Russian forces, again, making an advance, but not actually advancing in the town of Stepova itself. And as we discussed earlier, this is where Russia would actually achieve some objective. Seizing Stepova would be a tactical victory in the service of an operational objective, which is cutting off Avdiivka. Now, is Avdiivka in service of a strategic objective? Maybe surrounding and eliminating Ukrainian forces defending the town itself might be like considered a strategic objective, but right, you can see Russia isn't even serving that objective directly. It's just advancing beyond these windbreaks here into no man's land. But maybe there's some terrain here that might confer a small advantage when trying to take Stepova, but it's so minor, right? And of course, we look finally near Bodanivka, and it's the same story. Bodanivka is north of Klitschivka on the northern flank of Bakhmut, and you can see, again, this not insignificant, right? This Burkiva reservoir, the Russian forces advancing, taking this windbreak here, rolling back Ukrainian gains from earlier in the year. Again, is this part of a larger effort? Are they going to be encircling? Are they going to be taking the town of Bodanivka? Maybe they're preparing for something like this. But again, this we're talking about gains that are either marginal or of like no clear tactical value. But I don't think this is an accident, right? When we look over at the combat map, you can see Russian forces pushing 67 different combat engagements, heavily concentrated in Bakhmut and Avdiivka, with only a smattering of additional offensive actions elsewhere along the front lines. Don't think there's anything exceptional about that. Of course, Ukrainian forces focusing some of their long-range missile systems like HIMARS on to targeting Russian logistics that are moving to reinforce Ukraine's amphibious landing that is still ongoing in the town of Krinky, Kozachi Laheri, Poema, Pristyanivka, and elsewhere. And so this is, again, remains something of a stalemate, but you can see both sides using some of their technological advantages, like Russian forces, again, continuing to launch their airstrikes against Ukrainian positions on the Dnipro side as Ukraine responds by launching HIMARS strikes on the Russian side. So we're going to talk in a sec about the strategy that I think Ukraine is rolling out here. But of course, guys, it's the holidays, and I know it's exhausting dealing with all the holiday parties, the presents, the fourth quarter business nonsense, right? And you probably need some energy and some focus. That's why I'm here to tell you, I've got you covered. Strike Gum. This is a zero sugar energy drink alternative. It's gum, and it has 90 milligrams of caffeine. That's as much caffeine as a Red Bull or an Amp Energy, and 100 milligrams of alpha GPC to enhance focus and mental clarity. But best of all, again, zero sugar, 15 calories, and 50% of the profits from this first production run of Strike Gum, I'm donating to charities that support Ukrainian civilians who have been injured or displaced in the conflict. So if you're interested in getting a great surge of energy, focus, and not spending $4 a pop on energy drinks, check us out at Strike Gum. And if you are an energy drink person looking for a more affordable alternative, you can check out the tray, which offers 75 pieces of gum. That's the equivalent of 75 energy drinks for just what works out to a unit price of like 90 cents a piece. Way better deal and way less sugar than your conventional energy drink. So check us out, strikegum.com. Okay. Now, let's talk about President Zelensky in an interview conducted jointly, in an interview, basically, discussed that the intent to increase Ukrainian defenses and fortifications around the Ukrainian theater, but notably excluded Zaporizhzhia Oblast. Now, talking about ongoing future defensive measures. Zelensky stated yesterday that Ukrainian forces are going to strengthen their fortifications in all critical directions of the front. Kupiansk-Lyman, northern western Ukraine, Kherson, Avdiivka, Marinka, and other areas of Donetsk, right? He met with group commanders, also consulted with the U.S. chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Charles Brown. So all of this says that Ukraine is moving to a different strategy. And what I think, my thesis, is that the strategy looks much more about attrition, right? One of the things that, both sides have experienced a tremendous level of losses in this conflict, but the key difference is that for Ukraine, right, they're defending their territory. Their population, by and large, supports the war to liberate their full country from Russian invasion. But for Russians, this is a war of choice, and the limited independent surveys that take place in Russia indicate that the Russian public is actually losing stamina for this conflict. And it makes sense, right? The estimates now are between 150 and 200,000 Russian KIA, with another probably 400 to 600 WIA. So you're talking about an absolutely massive loss of life. For context, that's 10 times the losses that the Soviet Union experienced over 10 years of conflict in Afghanistan. And that failure resulted in the fall of the Russian government. And so I think Ukraine is looking at this and saying, all right, We need to find ways to fight efficiently, and we need to find ways to fight that is punishing to Russia. And this is likely the strategy they're pivoting to. That's why I think we're seeing low value terrain switch over to Russian hands, right? No major villages are in danger of being seized or encircled. But what we're seeing is that Ukraine is encouraging or not stopping Russian forces from leaving their trenches, exposing themselves to fire, taking tactical risk, and assuming significant casualties in exchange for gains of minimal strategic value. And I think that is a significant departure from Ukrainian efforts to actually take the initiative, assume the risk themselves, and try to push the Russians out of the territory en masse. I think both sides have kind of accepted that that's unlikely to occur. And so Ukraine has said, listen, if we yield, 100 meters here, 100 meters there, in the grand scheme of this entire front, it means very little. But if to take those 100 meters, the Russians expend dozens or hundreds of troops, then the casualties they sustain are going to become, unsustainable. And that, I think, is the core strategy that we're starting to see roll out in this war. Again, the Avdiivka is a classic example in which, yes, Russia has made progress, but at a cost of what appears to be a significant portion of their remaining armored forces. Many of the Russian elite VDV and mechanized forces have been ground out in this fighting. And in exchange, Avdiivka is not any closer to actually being encircled. There's been no change to the operational environment, even though, some farmers' fields that used to have Ukrainians in their muddy trenches now have some Russians in their muddy trenches. Is it actually a sign that there's a fundamental shift in the outlook of the war? No. Is there a fundamental shift in the outlook for Avdiivka? No. But Russia has taken a ton of casualties and Ukraine has taken comparatively fewer. So I think that is the strategy we're going to see Ukraine pursue for the next several months, right? Especially while Russia very publicly commits to continued offensive action. Ukraine starting to realize after their own offensive where they said, hey, listen, we took a lot of casualties trying to run into these Russian defensive forces when the Russian forces are not that professional. They're kind of amateurish. They're not very well equipped. Their organization was tactically sound, but it wasn't exceptionally, shockingly brilliant. And so the Ukrainians are probably saying, well, how good could we do if we made the Russians go on the attack and we used the full weight of our troops and equipment to try to just grind them into tremendous levels of casualties? I think we're going to find out in the next couple of months. Anyway, guys, that is all I had for you. Thank you so much to the Colonel tier members of Combat Vet News. Thank you to the Lieutenant tier members. I really couldn't do this without all you guys. Your support means everything to me because obviously YouTube, not a fan of war content, but I believe that what I'm doing means a lot. So thank you. Hit like and subscribe. See you in the next one. Cheers.